Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Ideas are fragile. In a company full of bright minds, the difference between recognition and invisibility often comes down to timing, courage, and a little bit of luck. You've spent weeks refining a concept you know could make a real impact, a strategy that could change the way your team approaches projects. Tomorrow, you'll present it to the CEO. The stakes are high, and your nerves are a mix of excitement and anxiety. You know your idea is solid, but in an environment where ambition runs high and credit is currency, you can't afford to misstep, not even once. As you prepare your notes and rehearse your points, a nagging thought lingers at the back of your mind. What if someone else takes the spotlight? In this story, you'll find out. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the office, glinting off the polished surfaces and making the city skyline look almost unreal. You sat at your desk, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard, not because you needed to type, but because your mind wouldn't stop racing. This was it. The meeting with the CEO was in a few hours, and your idea, the one you had been shaping and refining for weeks, was finally going to see the light of day. Every spreadsheet, every slide, every carefully crafted bullet point had been reviewed, revised, and rehearsed until it felt like second nature. Yet excitement mingled with nerves. You ran through the presentation silently, imagining your words landing with precision, your ideas sparking nods of agreement. You could almost hear the CEO asking the right questions, your responses flowing effortlessly. From across the office, you caught a glimpse of your colleague, Alex. Always impeccably dressed, always confident, Alex had a way of smiling that could charm the room, but there was a sharpness in their gaze that made you wary. Nothing overt, just subtle signs that this was someone used to winning attention, someone who noticed opportunities the moment they appeared. You shook off the thought. This was your moment. You had done the work. You had earned it. No one could take that away. Not today. Little did you know, someone was already planning to try. The office had its own rhythm. Keyboard clicks, muted conversations, the occasional burst of laughter from the break room. To outsiders, it looked collaborative, almost effortless, but beneath the surface, ambition moved like an undercurrent, quiet yet persistent. You noticed it most in meetings. Ideas were currency here. Some were nurtured, some ignored, and some quietly repackaged. It wasn't something anyone openly talked about, but everyone understood the unspoken rule. Visibility mattered as much as creativity. Later that afternoon, you stepped into the pantry, hoping caffeine might calm your restless thoughts. As the coffee machine hummed, Alex walked in, offering that familiar, polished smile. "Big day tomorrow," Alex said casually, leaning against the counter. "Heard you've been working on something interesting." You hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough to notice Alex's attentive gaze. "Just refining a strategy proposal," you replied, keeping your tone neutral. Alex nodded, as if filing the information away. "I'd love to hear more. Maybe we can align our approaches." It sounded collaborative, supportive even, yet something about the conversation felt off, not threatening, just probing, like a question that carried more weight than it appeared to. Back at your desk, you opened your presentation again. Every slide felt personal now, a reflection of long evenings, scribbled notes, and moments of inspiration that had arrived unexpectedly. This wasn't just an idea, it was proof of your capability, your potential. Across the room, Alex was in conversation with another team member, speaking animatedly, hands moving as if outlining a concept in the air. You couldn't hear the words, but the gestures looked strangely familiar. A flicker of unease settled in your chest. You told yourself it was nothing, paranoia fueled by nerves. After all, tomorrow would clarify everything. The meeting would give your idea the platform it deserved, your voice carrying the story behind every slide. Still, as the workday faded into evening and the office lights dimmed one by one, a quiet realization lingered. In a place where recognition defined success, Trust was never simple. And sometimes, the real competition wasn't announced. It unfolded silently right beside you. The conference room felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the weight of expectation pressing against the glass walls. The long table gleamed under soft lighting, chairs arranged with deliberate precision. At the head of the room sat an empty seat reserved for the CEO, a quiet reminder of the stakes. You placed your laptop on the table and took a slow breath, steadying yourself. Around you, team members filtered in, exchanging polite greetings and casual remarks that barely masked their own nerves. Meetings with the CEO were rare, and when they happened, they carried consequences, opportunities, promotions, visibility, and sometimes disappointment. Alex entered moments later, composed as ever. Their posture was relaxed, confident, as if this meeting were just another routine discussion. When their eyes met yours, they offered a friendly nod. You returned it automatically, though the unease from yesterday lingered faintly in your mind. Then, the door opened. Conversation stopped instantly as the CEO walked in, presence alone commanding attention. Everyone straightened, laptops opening, notebooks ready. The meeting began with brief updates from different departments, each presentation concise, efficient, calculated. Your turn was approaching. You felt it in the tightening of your shoulders, the heightened awareness of every sound, the tapping of pens, the shuffle of papers, the subtle hum of the projector. Your heart beat faster, but beneath the nerves was certainty. You knew your material. You believed in your idea. Finally, the CEO looked down the agenda and spoke your name. You reached for your laptop, preparing to stand, but Alex spoke first. "I'd like to present a strategy that could significantly improve our workflow efficiency," Alex said, smoothly, connecting their device to the projector. "It's something I've been developing over the past few weeks." The first slide appeared. Your breath caught. The structure, the framework, even the phrasing of key points, it was unmistakable. Your idea stared back at you from the screen, polished and repackaged, now wearing someone else's voice. For a moment, time fractured. Shock blurred your thoughts, confusion followed, then a surge of disbelief that felt almost surreal. You scanned the room, half expecting someone else to notice, to interrupt, to question. But colleagues leaned forward with interest, unaware of the silent theft unfolding before them. Alex spoke confidently, outlining concepts you had painstakingly built, presenting insights that had once lived only in your notes. Each word landed with precision, earning nods of approval and thoughtful expressions from the CEO. Inside, your emotions collided: anger, frustration, humiliation. Yet above all, one realization rose with sharp clarity. This was happening now, and what you did next would define everything. You straightened in your chair, pulse steadying as determination began to replace shock. The meeting wasn't over, and neither was your chance to reclaim your voice. Alex's voice filled the room with effortless confidence, each sentence delivered as though the idea had always belonged to them. The slides advanced one by one, revealing frameworks, projections, and strategies you knew by heart because they had once lived in your drafts, your late-night notes, your quiet moments of inspiration. You sat still, hands folded on the table, forcing your expression into neutrality while your thoughts raced. How? The question echoed loudly in your mind. You replayed recent conversations, shared documents, casual remarks exchanged in passing. Somewhere between collaboration and trust, your idea had slipped out of your control and into someone else's narrative. The CEO leaned forward, clearly engaged. "This is impressive," they said. "What led you to this approach?" Alex didn't hesitate. "I noticed gaps in our current workflow and started exploring alternatives," they replied smoothly. "After testing a few concepts, this framework showed the strongest potential." Your chest tightened. The words felt like erasure, not just of the idea itself, but of the effort behind it. The weeks of research, the iterations, the moments of doubt and clarity, all of it condensed into a story where you didn't exist. Around the table, colleagues nodded, some jotting down notes. A few glanced at you briefly, unaware of the storm unfolding behind your composed exterior. To them, this was just another presentation, another strategy, another meeting. But to you, it felt deeply personal. Your pulse quickened as anger surged, urging you to interrupt, to expose the truth immediately. The impulse was sharp, almost irresistible. Yet another voice surfaced, quieter, steadier, warning you of the risks. A confrontation could shift attention from the idea itself to the conflict itself, painting you as defensive or emotional. You realized the situation demanded something harder than anger: control. Alex continued speaking, now highlighting implementation steps you had carefully mapped out. Hearing your own reasoning echoed back through a different voice felt surreal, like watching someone else take credit for a memory. Then the CEO turned to the room. "Any thoughts or additions before we discuss next steps?" Silence followed. The question hung in the air like an opening door, an invitation, a challenge, a moment balanced on the edge of possibility. Your heartbeat drummed in your ears as you felt every pair of eyes waiting for someone to speak. This was it. Not just a chance to reclaim credit, but a test of composure, courage, and strategy. The room didn't need conflict, it needed clarity. And the way you chose to deliver that clarity would shape how everyone perceived the truth. You inhaled slowly, steadying yourself as determination replaced hesitation. The theft had already happened. Now came the response. Your fingers tightened slightly around your pen as silence lingered in the room. The CEO's question still hovered in the air, waiting to be claimed by someone brave enough or strategic enough to speak. Inside, a battle raged. One part of you demanded immediate confrontation. It imagined sharp words cutting through the room, exposing the truth in a single decisive moment. You pictured yourself pointing out timelines, emails, drafts, evidence that would make the situation undeniable. But another part of you hesitated, not out of fear, but awareness. Workplaces had their own rules, many of them unwritten. Truth alone didn't guarantee respect. Delivery mattered just as much. A public accusation could shift the focus away from the idea and onto your reaction, turning a moment of innovation into a scene of conflict. You understood something critical in that instant. This wasn't just about credit. It was about perception. You glanced around the table. Colleagues watched attentively, unaware of the storm beneath your calm exterior. Alex sat poised, confidence unwavering, hands resting lightly beside the laptop as if the presentation had unfolded exactly as planned. The ease of it all unsettled you. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had you been too open? Too trusting? Had subtle signals gone unnoticed because you were focused on refining the work itself rather than protecting it? Frustration flickered, followed by disappointment, not just in Alex, but in the situation as a whole. Creativity was supposed to be collaborative, yet recognition often felt like a scarce resource, guarded and contested. You exhaled slowly, grounding yourself. Anger would be easy. Silence would be easier, but neither would serve you. You thought about the effort behind the idea, the quiet evenings, the discarded drafts, the breakthroughs that arrived after hours of persistence. That work deserved acknowledgement, but more importantly, it deserved a voice that reflected confidence rather than resentment. A realization settled over you with unexpected clarity. This moment wasn't a trap. It was an opportunity. Not to fight for validation, but to demonstrate ownership in a way that felt undeniable, yet professional. To step into the conversation not as someone reclaiming stolen ground, but as someone expanding on an idea they deeply understood. The difference was subtle, but powerful. Your heartbeat steadied. The tension in your shoulders eased, replaced by focus. You didn't need confrontation to reveal the truth. You needed presence, clarity, and timing. And the room had just given you all three. You lifted your gaze toward the CEO, the decision finally made. It was time to speak, not from anger, but from certainty. You straightened slightly in your chair, letting a brief pause settle before speaking. The room's attention shifted toward you, not sharply, but with quiet curiosity, as if sensing an addition rather than a challenge. Actually, you began, voice calm and steady, I'd love to build on this. Alex's expression remained composed, though you caught a flicker of surprise in their eyes. It was subtle, gone almost instantly, but enough to confirm that your response hadn't been anticipated. You continued. This framework has been an exciting area of exploration over the past few weeks, you said. While developing early drafts, I focused on identifying workflow gaps that weren't immediately visible in our existing process. You noticed heads turning, interest sharpening. Your words weren't accusatory, they were additive, yet each sentence quietly established proximity, familiarity, ownership. You stood, moving toward the screen with measured confidence. One aspect that shaped the structure was testing multiple iterations, you explained, advancing a slide. For example, this implementation phase originally emerged from a pilot model I drafted while analyzing cross-team communication delays. The phrasing was intentional. Not, my idea was stolen, but this work came from a process I led. The distinction shifted the energy in the room. A few colleagues exchanged glances, subtle recognition dawning as pieces aligned. The CEO leaned back slightly, observing with heightened interest, not conflict, but clarity unfolding through context. Alex remained silent, posture unchanged, yet noticeably more restrained. You continued expanding on details only the creator would know. Decisions behind the structure, trade-offs considered during development, alternative models that had been discarded. Each insight reinforced your connection to the idea without a single accusatory word. By the time you finished, the narrative had subtly realigned. The idea was no longer a single presentation belonging to one voice. It had become a conversation rooted in your process, your reasoning, your depth of understanding. The CEO spoke first. This is exactly the level of insight I was hoping for, they said. It's clear there's been significant thought and experimentation behind this framework. A quiet shift moved through the room, an intangible recalibration of perception. No confrontation had occurred, yet the truth had surfaced through expertise, composure, and presence. You returned to your seat, pulse steady but energized. The moment hadn't required conflict, it had required confidence. And confidence, you realized, could be louder than accusation. Still, as the discussion moved forward, one question lingered in your mind. Had the message landed as clearly as you intended? The answer would unfold not in words, but in reactions yet to come. The discussion that followed felt different. What had begun as a straightforward presentation now carried a subtle undercurrent of reassessment. Colleagues leaned forward with renewed attention, asking questions that naturally directed themselves toward you. Questions about the research process, the testing phase, the reasoning behind certain decisions. Each time you responded, the connection between you and the idea strengthened, not through claims, but through familiarity. The CEO steered the conversation thoughtfully, inviting perspectives from the room. Yet there was a noticeable shift in their gaze, an analytical curiosity that moved between you and Alex, as though silently piecing together an unspoken narrative. Alex contributed when prompted, but the effortless confidence from earlier had softened. Their answers remained polished, yet lacked the depth your explanations carried. It wasn't dramatic or confrontational, just a quiet contrast that spoke louder than any accusation. Perception was changing. A colleague from operations spoke up. "I remember you mentioning a pilot model for this last week," they said, glancing toward you. The cross-team communication angle was really interesting. The comment landed gently but meaningfully, reinforcing your presence in the idea's history. Others nodded, recalling fragments of conversations, emails, brainstorming sessions. Small pieces of memory surfaced across the room, collectively reshaping the story. The ripple effect had begun. The CEO eventually summarized the discussion. "This framework shows strong potential," they said. "What's encouraging is the collaborative exploration behind it. I'd like both of you to refine the implementation plan together and present next steps." The word collaborative carried weight. It wasn't a verdict or an accusation, but it acknowledged complexity, recognizing that ideas rarely exist in isolation while subtly opening space for clarity about contributions. As the meeting ended, chairs slid back and quiet conversations resumed. The tension that had once filled the room dissolved into professional normalcy, yet something had undeniably shifted beneath the surface. You gathered your laptop, aware of glances from colleagues that felt more attentive than before. A few offered brief smiles or nods, small gestures that hinted at understanding without forcing a conversation. Alex approached you near the door. "That was a good addition," they said, tone neutral. "You clearly put a lot of thought into the details." The words hovered somewhere between acknowledgement and defense. You met their gaze calmly. "It's been an interesting process," you replied. "I'm glad the conversation opened up." Neither of you said more. The exchange remained polite, professional, unfinished. But as you stepped out into the hallway, one realization settled firmly in your mind. Truth didn't always arrive as a dramatic reveal. Sometimes it spread quietly, through memory, observation, and consistency, until the narrative reshaped itself. And once perception began to shift, it rarely returned to where it started.
The office felt unusually quiet after the meeting. Not silent, phones still rang, keyboards clicked, conversations drifted through the air, but quieter in the way your mind processes sound after a moment of intensity. Everything continued as normal, yet you carried a lingering awareness that something significant had just unfolded. You sat at your desk, staring at your laptop without really seeing the screen. Relief came first. You had spoken, you had stayed composed, you hadn't allowed anger to take control, nor had you surrendered to silence. The balance had been delicate, but you had navigated it with intention. Still, relief wasn't the only emotion present. Frustration lingered beneath the surface, sharp but muted. Not because the idea had been misunderstood, if anything, the meeting had clarified your role, but because the situation had existed at all. Trust, once shaken, rarely returned unchanged. You replayed moments from the past few weeks, casual conversations, shared documents, offhand remarks that once felt harmless. With hindsight, patterns emerged, subtle questions, curious observations, pauses that now seemed more intentional than accidental. The realization didn't bring anger as much as clarity. You had focused on creating value, others had focused on visibility. Neither approach was wrong, but the difference mattered. You leaned back in your chair, letting the insights settle. This experience hadn't diminished your idea, it had revealed something deeper about the environment you worked in. Recognition wasn't guaranteed by effort alone. It required presence, communication, and sometimes quiet assertion. Yet alongside that realization was something unexpected: pride. Not pride in winning or reclaiming credit, but in how you handled yourself. You had resisted the instinct to react emotionally, choosing instead to respond strategically. That choice hadn't just protected your idea, it had strengthened your confidence. You no longer felt like someone defending ownership. You felt like someone who understood it. Your phone buzzed with a message from a colleague. "Great insights in the meeting today. Your explanation really tied everything together." You read the message twice, a small smile forming. It wasn't dramatic recognition, but it was genuine, and sometimes genuine acknowledgement carried more weight than public praise. Across the office, Alex worked quietly, posture focused, expression unreadable. You felt no urge to confront them, no desire for dramatic resolution. The moment had already spoken for itself. Instead, a quieter determination emerged. This experience wasn't just an obstacle, it was a lesson about boundaries, communication, and the importance of claiming space for your voice before someone else did. Not through defensiveness, but through confidence. You opened your laptop and began organizing notes for the next steps of the project. The act felt symbolic, a reminder that your journey with the idea wasn't defined by a single meeting or moment of tension. It was defined by continuity. As you typed, a final realization surfaced, simple yet powerful. Credit could be taken, but credibility once demonstrated was far harder to steal, and today you had quietly secured yours. The days following the meeting unfolded with steady momentum. Emails circulated, follow-up discussions emerged. The framework, your framework, moved from concept to action, now occupying shared documents and team conversations. What had once felt personal was becoming organizational, shaped by multiple voices and perspectives. Yet, beneath the progress, you felt a quiet resolve forming. This wasn't about revisiting the past, it was about shaping the future. You sat at your desk reviewing project notes when a calendar notification appeared. Implementation planning, you and Alex. The meeting request felt inevitable, almost symbolic. Collaboration was now part of the CEO's directive, and avoiding the conversation wouldn't serve anyone, least of all you. Still, you knew this discussion required clarity. Not confrontation, not accusation, but boundaries. When the meeting began, the atmosphere was professional, restrained. Alex opened a document and began outlining timelines, tone composed as though the tension between you existed only in memory. You listened patiently before speaking. "Before we move forward," you said calmly, "I think it would help to clarify roles and contributions. This project has evolved through several stages, and aligning expectations will make collaboration smoother." Alex paused, eyes lifting from the screen. "That makes sense," they replied. Your voice remained steady. "I've been developing the core framework and pilot models over the past few weeks. I'd like to lead the strategic direction and implementation design moving forward. Of course, I'm open to collaboration on execution and refinement." The statement was simple, but intentional. No blame, no reference to the meeting, just clarity about ownership and responsibility. Alex considered your words for a moment before nodding. "Understood," they said. "I can focus on operational support and scaling the rollout." The agreement felt quiet, almost understated, yet its significance was undeniable. You weren't reclaiming territory, you were defining it. The conversation shifted naturally into planning. Tasks were assigned, timelines mapped, responsibilities documented. With each detail recorded, the boundaries became tangible, transforming from unspoken tension into structured collaboration. After the meeting, you remained seated for a moment reflecting. Setting boundaries had once felt uncomfortable, almost confrontational. But today it felt different, empowering, practical, necessary. You realized boundaries weren't walls meant to divide people. They were frameworks that protected clarity and respect. And clarity, you now understood, prevented misunderstandings before they had the chance to grow. You also made quieter changes. You began documenting ideas earlier, sharing progress updates in team channels, and inviting feedback in visible spaces. Not as a defensive strategy, but as a deliberate approach to visibility, ensuring your work carried your voice wherever it went. These actions didn't feel like protection. They felt like ownership. As the workday ended, you packed your bag with a sense of calm confidence. The situation with Alex hadn't resulted in dramatic confrontation or apology, but something more meaningful had emerged: mutual awareness. And awareness changed behavior. Walking out of the office, one realization stayed with you. Confidence wasn't just about speaking when challenged. It was about creating environments where your voice was recognized before challenges even arose. And for the first time since the meeting, the tension that once weighed on you felt replaced by something steadier: control. Weeks passed, and the framework transformed from an idea on slides into a living project. Meetings shifted from conceptual discussions to execution updates. Teams began testing implementation phases, early results surfaced, and the strategy started producing measurable improvements. What once existed as a personal vision had become a shared success story, one that quietly carried your fingerprints in every layer. Recognition arrived gradually, not through a single dramatic announcement, but through consistent acknowledgement. Colleagues sought your input during planning sessions, looping you into conversations that shaped key decisions. Your perspective became expected rather than requested, a subtle yet powerful shift in how your presence was perceived. One afternoon, the CEO stopped by your desk. "I've been reviewing the progress," they said. "The strategic foundation behind this project is strong. Your insights in that meeting really clarified its direction." The moment felt simple, almost casual, yet the weight of the words settled deeply. It wasn't just credit, it was validation. After they left, you sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the significance. The journey hadn't unfolded as you originally imagined. There had been tension, uncertainty, and moments of quiet frustration, but the outcome carried a deeper meaning than straightforward recognition ever could. You had grown. Your relationship with Alex had stabilized into professional neutrality. Collaboration continued, but with clear boundaries and mutual awareness that prevented past ambiguities from resurfacing. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no confrontation revisited, just a quiet recalibration of respect. And that was enough. More importantly, your relationship with yourself had changed. You no longer felt hesitant to speak when your voice mattered. You understood that ownership wasn't something granted by others. It was something demonstrated through confidence, clarity, and consistency. The experience had reshaped your understanding of workplace dynamics, revealing that professionalism and assertiveness weren't opposing forces, they were complementary strengths. As the project reached its next milestone, your team gathered for a brief update meeting. Discussions flowed smoothly, ideas exchanged freely, and the environment felt collaborative in a way that now included visibility and respect for individual contributions. Walking out afterward, you paused near the office windows, watching the city stretch beyond the glass. The skyline looked the same as it had on the morning of the CEO meeting, yet your perspective had shifted entirely. The stolen credit had once felt like a loss. Now, it felt like a turning point. Not because the situation had been fair, but because your response had revealed something essential about your character: resilience without bitterness, confidence without confrontation, and professionalism without silence. You realized that ideas might be shared, reshaped, or even taken, but the voice behind them, once strengthened, couldn't be easily overlooked again. With a quiet smile, you turned back toward your desk, ready for whatever challenges awaited next. This time, not just as someone with ideas, but as someone who knew how to own them. In every workplace, ideas travel faster than the people who create them. They pass through conversations, presentations, and shared documents, often losing traces of their origin along the way. Recognition, like opportunity, doesn't always arrive fairly or predictably. But this story was never just about stolen credit. It was about voice. It was about the quiet strength required to remain composed when emotions surge, the courage to speak without accusation, and the wisdom to understand that credibility is built not in a single moment, but through consistent presence. The experience reshaped more than a project. It reshaped perspective. What once felt like a threat became a lesson in visibility. What felt like betrayal revealed the importance of boundaries. And what seemed like loss ultimately led to growth that couldn't be measured in titles or praise. Because true ownership isn't defined by who speaks first. It's defined by who understands deeply, contributes consistently, and stands confidently behind their work, even when recognition momentarily drifts elsewhere. Some victories are loud, celebrated with applause and public acknowledgement. Others unfold quietly, visible only through subtle shifts in respect, trust, and self-belief. This was one of the quiet victories. And long after the meeting ended, long after the project evolved, one truth remained. Ideas may be shared, credit may be contested, but confidence, once earned, stays with you, guiding every idea that follows. Thank you for watching and improving your English with this real-life story. If this lesson helped you practice your listening, vocabulary, or speaking skills, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more English learning stories every week. Repeat the sentences, practice the phrases, and try to use them in your daily life. Your English will improve step by step. See you in the next real-life English story.